So I got caught off in my last video, kind of just talking about why sometimes when we are grappling with something new, and I almost am happy that this is almost a human phenomenon, where if we're stuck with something, we almost find ourselves almost faced with an obstacle or like a brick wall, almost to help us identify that this is a sign for us to slow down and to reevaluate the direction that we're going in with maybe the passion behind it and the strategy we want to use to kind of convey an idea. So my last video I was talking about why is it that somehow women tend to be subjugated in certain communities when they try to evolve or educate themselves around a certain idea, and maybe the broader community is not quite ready to adopt this new way of thinking, or doesn't really know how to think about how to adapt or adopt with it. So usually there's just resistance in some way, and you kind of have to figure out how to be kind of diplomatic in how to convey what your wants and needs are, and what supports you can kind of look for, and how to support yourself. So because I'm somebody who relies heavily on anonymity and power, I already know that anytime I am almost presented with a struggle, I know this is just part of my life path. So I always just kind of go with it. I know that sometimes having supports in the world is difficult, but I always just rely on the fact that if I have something greater than people, eventually, if it's something that has a worthy cause or like a high ethic, hopefully eventually people will be persuaded to kind of understand with me like what my perspective is and what my goal is, and then we'll kind of evolve into something. It doesn't have to be what my initial goal was, but maybe just help me understand, why am I grappling with this, and why do I seem to be the only one that's grappling with this, and then what is the general kind of ambience around this idea, or like the climate, as it were. So I just found this actually in an email. I get these emails from X, I guess, which was formerly Twitter, where someone was asking if in some public schools you have, well, just now because with homosexuality, we don't want to almost undermine children's understanding of different gender constructs and how they might want to identify in a broad way. So, like from a secular perspective, within religious traditions, I think different communities are kind of at different points of understanding how they want to understand that, and how they want to almost be accepting of the diversity that can kind of arise from different ways of identifying yourself. So I hesitate to kind of talk about how religion and like a secular worldview would view something as almost contentious and almost still new, which include like gays, lesbians, queers, transgender, or any kind of those kind of identities that are, I don't want to say gender fluid, but it's almost like people who are experimenting with like, what is my sexual identity relative to another woman? If I'm a woman, are we comfortable just being friends, or is it something beyond that? And then if it is it something that we just want to feel like this is just a safe way for me to explore myself sexually, and then I don't really want to build a relationship based on that kind of interaction. I just want to almost experiment with myself, and would you be comfortable understanding that with me? So this is something that I was actually I watched a clip on the Big Bang Theory, and it was almost kind of hinting at that we don't really have a set way of understanding the ins and outs of what like the pathway in a relationship is. It's very amorphous. Like it's always dependent on like the two people involved, and then their group of friends, and then what the kind of culture that they live in is, and then what the societal norms are, and then what they're comfortable kind of exploring in as like a niche or a clique within like their whole, because you'll have like, it's kind of like high school, right? It's just like this ecosystem that has all these different subgroups. So you'll have like maybe the athletes, or you'll have the people who like enjoy music, or so life as we age or as we develop through adulthood, it kind of has that, and it kind of resembles that. And when we go into a relationship, all of that almost falls apart, and you're just like, well, what can be a common interest that we can build on? For some people it is religion, for some people it's their career, for some people it's, well, we just kind of friends of friends, or we met through friends, or we were like at a party, and so sometimes that initial attraction is enough, but then after that it's like, well, what can we find as a common ground that's sturdy enough to help us through like significant conflict? Is there going to be anything there? And so that could be why sometimes people almost before going into marriage, they want to find like a common value that, feeling anything kind of coinciding as something we can agree on. What is one thing we can agree on? So this is it's a very difficult question, especially in a time now where like we're all developing in completely new ways. We want to think in new ways, and we also want to identify like almost new language to kind of correspond with a postmodern worldview. So the question in the email was, if you were a teacher in a public school and you know that there are kids in your class who are trying on different gender constructs or trying on different identities, would you feel like you are um, almost given the responsibility to inform the parents? And for me, I don't know how to understand that question, because it's almost saying, I know in university, parents who ask about their children's grades, professors or deans or advisors will say, we can't divulge that information, even if the parents are paying for the tuition. So it's almost like, I like the idea that they're like the system in North America is almost trying to say, you know, we appreciate that you are advocating or supporting your child's education and furthering their kind of um, want for like an educated life, and we still have to kind of maintain their privacy. So if they decide that maybe they don't want to and they drop out, that's their option. So this was something like I kind of grew up with to try to understand, was like, where do I find that boundary for myself? And the earliest memory that I have was when I was I think in grade one, where I tried to wear the headscarf. I used to get them, like my mom's family friends would gift me some like different colored ones. So I try them on. Sometimes I'd go to school with one on, and then I'd kind of like put it in my desk after. I wouldn't wear it for the entire day. And I think it was in grade 3 or 4 where one of my peers asked me, like, why do you wear that? Like, your hair does it change color every day? And so I never, I mean, to me, it was like, it doesn't bother me. I'm kind of neutral about it, but I was like, I mean, I can be different. I noticed that I was different, like the only one doing this, but it was almost because, I mean, I wasn't different from my mom, so I didn't see it as something that was bad in it, different in a bad way. But anyway, I'd put it on and off, and it wasn't really something I thought about, I think, with any kind of judgment or value, ridden judgment. And then I think it was in grade 6 that I kept it on, like in public school. And I never thought that it really was something I needed to explain. Like, people never really asked me why I wore it. So I don't know what I would think if I took it off, and then like would my teachers wonder, are we supposed to tell your parents now that you don't wear it? And it becomes, this could be a problem, because it takes me back to certain countries where religion wants to almost be the government. So it's to say, we want to rule with a doctrinal law instead of like a secular law. And the problem with that is that you might have, you know, depending at the country, you know, at these points in time, we're going to stop and pray. So if somebody decides, I don't want to pray the way you pray, what are you supposed to do? It's like, am I going to be like imprisoned? Am I going to be fined? Am I going to be charged? So this becomes very contentious, and it's things we kind of have to be very, very, very slow and tentative to kind of implement and decide, like, how do we want to do this? Because we want to encourage people's understanding of, this is my freedom of expression, and this is something I'm allowed about myself. And within that freedom, I still have this overarching like civic law that helps us almost understand how to be kind of compassionate with each other and understand how to bridge with each other and be like kind of culturally informed. But then in doing that, where do I find that intrinsic kind of esteem that I want for other people? Like, I want to be esteemed for the individual I'm becoming and like the different ways I'm exploring who I am. And because of that, I also want to make sure that I'm respecting that in other people. So it almost speaks to, like, there's an ethic there, and usually people will say that's found in religion. But then it's like, yeah, but it's not outside of religion either. Like, you'll find ethical people everywhere who might not identify like as subscribing to a particular religion. So then you think, okay, so now if I think, okay, we're not going to rule with like a government that has these kind of expectations, where if you are going to choose a certain identity or a certain gender or a certain sexual orientation, we won't inform your parents. Then you have to wonder, like, especially in private school, sometimes the expectation is because parents are paying, they want to know like everything about their child. So it becomes, well, we're going to have to, as parents or as adults, like, we're going to have to actually make these choices now and decisions. And remember, like, back to when we were kids, because it's basically, we're the ones that are voting, right? So if we know that this is the country we want to live in, this is the freedom of expression we want to make sure is available for our kids so that we don't have like intolerances building up again. How do we want to make sure that we are informed and that we remain informed and that we evolve with technology in a healthy way so that we're allowing ourselves to be accepting of ourselves if we want to kind of remain traditional, or if we want to sort of adapt some tradition and some progress. And saying progress is a very tricky word because like we're all progressive, like we're all using technology, right? There's some communities maybe that don't use it as much as others, but to what degree can we say that we aren't traditional, even if we are like the most progressive? Because tradition is basically built on what we know of the scripture around time of Jesus, and it's around the idea of how do we build a common society where we respect each other's ideas of how they want to live their life. So it's an important question. It's a very, very like new question too, because it almost suggests that we have to become almost like our own politician in a way. Like we have to really know how to advocate for ourselves. And if we do that, then you understand, okay, well then we have to go back to pedagogy, like that kind of question I was talking about last time. If we understand, okay, well we can think about evolution, but if we think of the cycle of life and rebirth, we can think, well, we don't have to assume that it's like a time that started and then it just ends. If we think, okay, maybe it was like that initial like Big Bang, but from there on, we're constantly building life. So yeah, we might have monkeys again. We might have, you might be reincarnated into a type of animal before you become human again. And who knows if there's, um, like, it doesn't have to be right or wrong. It's just that maybe you're not actually dead or sleeping, but you're remaining sentient in the world so that you're not necessarily a shadow, but you're maybe a pet or like a free bird. And then you come back as a human in some form how many years later. So having these ideas where we can kind of understand that the education system can be also a democratic process is almost to see, yeah, like what is the concern in entertainment now, and what can we learn from entertainment that we can kind of bring into the education process, and then have kids kind of revisit and tell us what they think, and then what are they comfortable doing, because the whole socialization process is that it's just like osmosis. Like one idea will kind of just diffuse, right? And then as people decide, how comfortable are we with this, it'll either fade away or it'll kind of concentrate somewhere and then it'll continue to move on. So we don't have to see it as a threat, even though change can be daunting if we don't really know what to expect. We can almost say, we almost want to jump to the worst scenario. But if we know that children by their nature are curious and they're not malevolent, right? They can be socialized to have difficult emotions to deal with, maybe because they had attachment issues at the very beginning of their life. So, and that improves. Like it can be unlearned, and they can learn to have healthy attachment again. So, the knowing about like neuroplasticity and growth mindset, that anything that we learned as a behavior can be unlearned, and we can positively adapt to new ways of thinking and being, then that in itself is already building something that we can look forward to as a goal that's positive. So it's not that we're going in blindly. It's like we already know so much about human development that we can kind of forecast what to expect, and we don't have to be scared about it. So, new idea. It's kind of contentious, but hopefully one that'll generate a lot of new discussion.